Princess Salith Von Kai stood at the viewing window of the diplomatic vessel and watched the blue and green world grow larger before her eyes, and she felt nothing but contempt for what she saw below. The planet was called New Cascadia by its human settlers, a remote colony world at the edge of explored space, and it was everything that the Sari Dominion considered primitive and beneath their attention. Wild forests stretched across entire continents. Simple settlements dotted the coastlines, and the humans who lived there had barely begun to understand the secrets of the stars they now traveled between. Salith's wings rustled beneath her ceremonial robes as she turned away from the window, and the soft purple glow of her compound eyes reflected her irritation at being sent to such a place. She was the crown princess of the Sari Dominion, heir to an empire that spanned 40 star systems, and yet here she was, forced to attend a diplomatic meeting with creatures her people considered little more than clever animals. "Your Highness," a voice called from behind her, and Salith turned to face her cousin Prince Vorath, whose mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among their kind. "We will arrive at the human settlement within the hour. Are you prepared for the ceremonial hunt they have arranged in your honor?" Salith's antennae twitched with annoyance as she regarded Vorath, who was second in line to the throne and had always resented standing in her shadow. He was larger than her, his exoskeleton a deeper shade of crimson, and his forearms were thick with muscle from years of military training. But none of that mattered because the Sari succession followed the eldest child of the reigning monarch, and Salith had been born 3 cycles before him. "I am prepared," she answered in the clicking, chirping language of their people, "though I fail to understand why we must participate in the barbaric customs of these humans. They hunt for sport, Vorath, not for survival or ritual purpose." Vorath moved closer to her, and something in his posture made Salith uneasy, though she could not identify what troubled her. "The humans are new to the galactic community," he said in a tone that seemed almost too smooth, "and the High Council believes showing respect for their traditions will make future negotiations easier. Besides, their wilderness is said to be quite beautiful, even if their species is unremarkable." Salith accepted this explanation, though a small part of her mind wondered why her father had insisted Vorath accompany her on this mission. The Emperor had seemed distracted lately, consumed by matters of state that he refused to discuss with her, and she had noticed strange looks passing between members of the court when they thought she was not watching. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere of New Cascadia, and Salith watched the forests grow from a green blur into individual trees that stood taller than any vegetation on her home world. The humans had built their main settlement near the coast, a collection of buildings that seemed crude compared to the crystalline towers of the Sari Prime. But she supposed it was impressive for such a young species. A delegation of humans waited on the landing platform, their soft faces turned upward to watch the alien vessel touch down, and Salith could see the mixture of fear and wonder in their eyes. They were such strange creatures, these humans, with their exposed skin and their limited sensory organs. And yet they had somehow discovered faster than light travel and joined the galactic community less than a century ago. The human governor stepped forward as Salith descended from the shuttle, and he bowed low in a gesture of respect that her translator identified as sincere. "Your Highness," he said through his own translation device, "we are honored beyond words to welcome you to New Cascadia. We have prepared a traditional hunt in the northern wilderness, where the forests are untouched and the wildlife is abundant." Salith inclined her head in acknowledgement, though she did not return the bow. The Sari royalty did not bow to lesser species, no matter how diplomatic the occasion. The hunting party departed the next morning in a sleek shuttle designed for atmospheric travel, and Salith found herself seated across from Vorath as the vehicle skimmed over endless kilometers of forest. The pilot, a young human female, narrated the journey with obvious pride in her world, pointing out mountain ranges and river systems that Salith pretended to find interesting. "We are approaching the hunting grounds," the pilot announced, and Salith noticed that Varath had become very still, his compound eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Your Highness, would you like me to bring us lower so you can see the explosion came without warning?" One moment Salith was watching the trees below, and the next she was tumbling through the air as the shuttle tore itself apart around her. She heard Varath shouting something, but the words were lost in the roar of flames and the screech of tearing metal. And then she struck something hard, and the world dissolved into darkness. When Salith opened her eyes, she found herself lying in a crater of broken trees and burning debris, and the pain that flooded her body told her immediately that she was badly injured. Her left wing was torn, the delicate membrane that allowed her kind to glide shredded beyond repair, and she could feel fractures in her exoskeleton along her torso and two of her limbs. She tried to call out, but her translator was destroyed, and her voice emerged only as the clicking and chirping sounds that no human would understand. She could see the main wreckage of the shuttle burning perhaps 100 meters away, but there was no sign of Varath or the human pilot. With tremendous effort, Salith dragged herself toward the wreckage, leaving a trail of bioluminescent blue blood behind her, and every movement sent waves of agony through her broken body. She had been trained to endure pain, as all the Sari royalty were, but this was beyond anything she had experienced. When she finally reached the shuttle, she found it empty. There were no bodies, no survivors, nothing but flames and twisted metal, and Salith's mind struggled to understand what this meant. Had Varath escaped and gone for help, or had the truth struck her like a physical blow? She remembered his strange behavior, the way he had positioned himself near the emergency exit, the odd look in his eyes just before the explosion. This was no accident, she realized with horror. This was assassination. Varath had sabotaged the shuttle and escaped, leaving her to die in the wilderness of this primitive world. And by the time anyone thought to search for her, she would be nothing but bones scattered among the alien trees. Salith collapsed against a fallen trunk as the sun began to set, and the forest around her came alive with sounds she did not recognize. Creatures moved through the undergrowth, drawn by the scent of her blood, and her compound eyes could detect shapes circling in the growing darkness. She was the crown princess of the Zasari Dominion, heir to an empire of 40 star systems, and she was going to die alone on a planet whose name she had barely bothered to learn. The first predator emerged from the shadows, a four-legged creature with gleaming eyes and teeth that dripped with saliva, and Salith raised her ceremonial blade with a trembling arm. She would fight, because the Sari royalty did not surrender, but she knew it was hopeless. More shapes gathered at the edge of her vision, drawn by her glowing blood, and Salith felt something she had never experienced before in her privileged life: true despair. Then, just as the first creature prepared to spring, a new sound erupted through the forest, a deep thunderous barking that sent the predators scattering into the night. Something massive crashed through the undergrowth, and Salith raised her blade higher, certain that an even larger predator had come to claim her. But when the creature burst into the clearing, it stopped, and it looked at her with eyes that held no hunger. The beast was enormous, covered in thick fur of black and white and brown, and its mouth hung open to reveal teeth that could crush bone. But it did not attack, and as Salith watched in confusion, it simply sat down and stared at her. What manner of creature was this, she wondered, and why had it saved her? The answer, she would soon discover, would change everything she thought she knew about the universe and her place within it. Salith kept her blade raised as the massive creature sat before her in the fading light, and her heart pounded against her fractured exoskeleton as she waited for it to attack. Surely this beast had driven away the smaller predators only to claim the prey for itself. But the creature did not move toward her with aggression. Instead, It tilted its head to one side and made a soft sound that her damaged translator could not interpret. A sound that seemed almost like a question. "Stay back," Saleth commanded in her native language, knowing the creature could not understand her words, but hoping her tone would convey her meaning. "I am Saleth Varnkai, Crown Princess of the Dasari Dominion, and I will not be eaten by some primitive beast." The creature's tail moved back and forth across the ground in a sweeping motion, and it made the questioning sound again before rising to its 4 feet. Saleth's grip tightened on her blade, but the beast did not approach her directly. Instead, it circled around her at a respectful distance, its nose twitching as it sampled the air. And Saleth realized it was investigating her scent the way a Dasari scout might investigate an unknown territory. The creature paused when it reached the trail of blue blood she had left behind, and it lowered its head to sniff the glowing substance. What happened next shocked the princess beyond words. The creature turned back to face her, and then it lay down on the ground beside her, pressing its warm body against her cold-blooded form. The heat radiating from its fur was almost overwhelming to Saleth, whose species was accustomed to much cooler temperatures. But she found that the warmth eased some of the pain in her broken limbs. "What are you doing?" Saleth whispered, her confusion overwhelming her fear. "Why are you not attacking me? What manner of creature are you?" The beast responded by resting its massive head on her lap, and Saleth found herself frozen in place, unable to understand this behavior. In all her studies of alien species, she had never encountered a predator that showed gentleness toward potential prey. The night grew darker and colder, and the sounds of the forest became more threatening as unseen creatures moved through the shadows. Saleth could feel her strength fading as her blood continued to seep from her wounds, and she knew that she could not survive much longer without proper medical attention. Then the circling predators returned. Saleth heard them first, the soft padding of feet and the low growls that signaled hunting behavior, and she saw their eyes gleaming at the edge of the clearing. There were more of them now, perhaps a dozen of the 4-legged creatures with the sharp teeth, and they had overcome their fear of the loud barking. The beast beside her rose to its feet in an instant, and the transformation in its demeanor was remarkable. Where moments ago it had been gentle and calm, now it stood with its legs braced wide and its fur standing on end, making it appear even larger than before. A growl emerged from deep within the creature's chest, a sound so powerful that Saleth felt it vibrate through the ground beneath her. The beast's lips pulled back to reveal those crushing teeth, and it faced the approaching predators without any sign of retreat. The first predator lunged forward, and the beast met it with explosive violence. Saleth watched in amazement as the furry creature intercepted the attacker, its jaws clamping down on the predator's neck and shaking with terrible force. The attacker went limp and was thrown aside, and the beast immediately turned to face the next threat. One by one, the predators tested the beast's defenses, and one by one, they were driven back. The beast did not pursue them or try to kill them all. It simply stood between Saleth and anything that threatened her, barking with that thunderous voice until the attackers retreated into the darkness. When the last predator had fled, the beast turned back to Saleth and approached her with that same gentle manner it had shown before. It sniffed her wounds carefully, then lay down beside her once again, pressing its warmth against her cooling body. "You protected me," Saleth said, still struggling to comprehend what she had witnessed. "You fought for me, and I am not your kind, not your pack, not anything to you. Why would you do this?" The beast looked at her with eyes that seemed to hold understanding far beyond what any animal should possess, and it pressed its head against her hand in a gesture that felt almost like comfort. Saleth did not sleep that night, but she survived it, and when the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, the beast rose and stretched its body before approaching her with obvious purpose. It gripped the edge of her tattered robe in its teeth and pulled gently, urging her to rise. You want me to follow you, Salith realized. And despite the agony that every movement caused, she forced herself to her feet. Very well, strange creature, I have no other options. Lead me where you will. The journey through the forest was torture beyond anything Salith had experienced. Her broken limbs screamed with every step, and her torn wing dragged uselessly behind her, catching on branches and undergrowth. Multiple times she collapsed from exhaustion and pain, certain that she could go no further. But each time she fell, the beast returned to her side. It would nudge her with its nose, lick her face with its warm tongue, and make encouraging sounds until she found the strength to continue. When she could not stand, it would lie beside her until she recovered enough to try again. The beast also provided for her in ways that amazed the princess. When she became desperately thirsty, the creature led her to a stream and demonstrated how to drink by lapping at the water with its tongue. When she had no strength to hunt, it disappeared into the forest and returned with small prey animals, dropping them at her feet like offerings. Salith had never eaten raw meat before, but survival had become her only priority, and she forced herself to consume the food the beast provided. The creature watched her eat with what seemed like satisfaction, its tail sweeping back and forth in that strange gesture she was beginning to recognize as pleasure. Days passed in this manner, though Salith lost track of exactly how many. Her wounds began to fester in the humid forest air, and fever clouded her mind until she could barely distinguish reality from hallucination. Through it all, the beast never left her side. It guided her through terrain that would have been impassable without its knowledge of the forest, and it protected her from dangers she could not even perceive in her weakened state. This creature, this primitive animal from a primitive world, had become her sole hope of survival. On what she believed was the fourth or fifth day, Salith noticed that the forest was changing around them. The trees were becoming smaller, the undergrowth less dense, and she could detect strange scents on the wind that reminded her of artificial materials and processed foods. The beast's behavior changed as well, and it moved with increased purpose, often looking back at Salith with eyes that seemed to urge her to move faster. It was excited about something, she realized, and that excitement gave her the strength to push through her exhaustion. Then she saw it through a gap in the trees, a structure. It was small and simple by the Sari standards, a collection of buildings made from local materials and synthetic compounds. But to Salith, it looked like the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Where there was a structure, there might be communication equipment, medical supplies, and the possibility of rescue. The beast barked loudly, not with aggression, but with what sounded like joy, and it bounded forward toward the building before stopping to look back at Salith. It was inviting her to follow. She understood, inviting her to the place it called home. You belong to someone, Salith whispered as understanding finally dawned in her fevered mind. You are not wild at all, are you? You have a master, and you have been leading me to them this entire time. The creature barked again and ran forward, disappearing around the corner of the building, and Salith heard a voice calling out in a language she did not understand. Moments later, a figure appeared at the edge of the forest, and Salith saw her first human up close. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that widened in shock as he spotted the alien princess standing among the trees. The beast was beside him, barking and dancing with obvious excitement, and the human looked from the creature to Salith and back again. Then, without hesitation, he ran toward her. Salith tried to raise her blade, but her strength finally failed her, and she collapsed to the ground as darkness claimed her vision. The last thing she felt was strong arms lifting her from the dirt, and the last thing she heard was a voice speaking words of reassurance in a language she could not understand. The beast had delivered her to its human, and now her fate rested in the hands of this stranger from a species she had always considered beneath her notice. Marcus Chen had been searching for Kodiak for 2 days when his loyal companion finally returned. And the relief that flooded through him was quickly replaced by confusion when he saw what the dog had brought home. An alien lay collapsed at the edge of the forest, a creature unlike anything Marcus had ever seen in his 12 years on New Cascadia. It had 4 arms, large compound eyes that glowed with a faint purple light, and an exoskeleton that shimmered with colors of deep crimson and gold. One of its wing-like appendages was torn and dragging on the ground, and blue blood, actual glowing blue blood, seeped from multiple wounds across its body. Marcus did not hesitate for even a moment. He ran to the fallen alien and lifted it carefully in his arms, noting how light it was despite its size. Kodiak barked and danced around him, clearly proud of himself, and Marcus found himself wondering just what his dog had been doing for the past 2 days. "Easy, buddy," Marcus said, as he carried the unconscious alien toward his research station. "I don't know what you found out there, but we need to help them first and ask questions later." The research station was modest by any standard, a collection of prefabricated buildings that served as Marcus's home, laboratory, and connection to the outside world. He had been stationed here for 6 years, studying the unique ecosystem of New Cascadia's northern wilderness, and in all that time, he had never encountered anything like this. Marcus laid the alien on his medical cot and began assessing its injuries with the limited supplies he had available. The wounds were severe, that much was clear, and some of them showed signs of infection that worried him greatly. "I'm not a doctor," Marcus muttered to himself as he cleaned the wounds with antiseptic solution, "and I definitely didn't train for alien biology. But I've patched up enough injured animals to know the basics." Kodiak sat beside the cot, watching Marcus work with those intelligent brown eyes, and occasionally he would lean forward to sniff the alien's hand or face. The dog seemed genuinely concerned about this strange creature, and Marcus found himself touched by his companion's compassion. "You saved them, didn't you?" Marcus said to Kodiak as he applied bandages to the worst of the wounds. "You found this person out there in the forest, and you kept them alive long enough to bring them here." "Good boy, Kodiak, you're the best dog in the whole galaxy." Kodiak's tail thumped against the floor at the praise, and he settled down beside the cot as if standing guard over his patient. The alien drifted in and out of consciousness over the next several hours, and during its waking moments, it would make clicking and chirping sounds that Marcus could not understand. He tried speaking to it in Standard, the common language of human colonies, but the alien seemed unable to comprehend his words any more than he could comprehend its. Marcus searched through the alien's tattered clothing and found what appeared to be a device of some kind, damaged but possibly repairable. His training as a researcher had given him some basic engineering skills, and he spent hours carefully examining the device's components. "This looks like a translator," Marcus realized as he studied the intricate circuitry. "If I can fix this, maybe we can actually communicate." Days passed as Marcus cared for his unexpected guest, and he fell into a routine that balanced his medical duties with his attempts to repair the translator. He fed the alien simple foods, testing carefully to see what its biology could tolerate, and he changed its bandages regularly to prevent further infection. Kodiak never left the alien's side for long. The dog would lie beside the cot during the night, sharing his warmth with the cold-blooded creature, and during the day he would rest his head on the mattress and watch the alien with patient devotion. Marcus had never seen his dog bond so quickly with anyone, and it made him wonder what had happened between them in the forest. On the 5th day, the alien's fever finally broke, and its compound eyes opened with a clarity they had lacked before. It looked around the room with obvious confusion, taking in the simple furnishings and the scientific equipment, and then its gaze settled on Marcus. The alien spoke in its clicking language, and Marcus shook his head apologetically. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't understand you, but I've been working on fixing your translator, and I think I'm almost there." He held up the device he had been repairing, and the alien's eyes widened with recognition. It reached out with one of its four hands and took the translator, examining Marcus's work with obvious expertise. The alien made some adjustments to the device, reconnecting circuits that Marcus had been unable to identify, and then it pressed a button that caused the machine to hum with power. When it spoke again, the clicking sounds were accompanied by synthesized words in standard. "Where am I?" the alien asked, its voice emerging from the translator as feminine and surprisingly melodic. "Who are you, and why have you helped me?" Marcus smiled with relief at finally being able to communicate. "My name is Marcus Chun," he said, "and you're at my research station in the northern wilderness of New Cascadia. As for why I helped you, why wouldn't I?" The alien stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus could not read the expression on her insectoid face. "You do not know who I am," she said, and it was a statement rather than a question. "I know you were badly hurt and needed help," Marcus replied. "That's all I needed to know." The alien's antennae twitched in what might have been surprise. "I am Salith Vonkai," she said, "Crown Princess of the Thesari Dominion. My shuttle was sabotaged by my own cousin, who left me for dead in your wilderness." Marcus's eyebrows rose at this information, but his expression remained kind rather than awed. "Well, Your Highness," he said, "it's nice to meet you. I wish it were under better circumstances." Salith seemed taken aback by his casual reaction. "You do not seem impressed by my title," she observed. "Should I be?" Marcus asked with genuine curiosity. "I mean, it sounds important, but out here titles don't mean much. What matters is that you're hurt and you need help, and I've got the supplies and skills to provide that help." Kodiak chose that moment to rise and place his head on the edge of the cot, and Salith looked at the dog with an expression that Marcus could only describe as wonder. "This creature," Salith said, "it saved my life. It found me after the crash and protected me from predators, and it led me through the forest to this place. I do not understand why it would do such things for a stranger." Marcus reached down and scratched behind Kodiak's ears, and the dog's tail wagged happily. "This is Kodiak," Marcus said with obvious affection. "He's been my best friend for 9 years now, ever since he was a puppy. And dogs, that's what his species is called. Dogs are special. They don't care about species or titles or whether someone can do something for them in return. They just care about helping those who need it." "But why?" Salith pressed, struggling to understand. "What does he gain from such behavior?" Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "Kodiak doesn't think about what he gains," he said finally. "He saw someone in trouble, and his instinct was to help. That's what dogs do, because thousands of years ago, humans and dogs formed a partnership based on loyalty and love. We take care of them, and they take care of us." Salith was silent for a long moment, processing this information. "Among my people," she said slowly, "such loyalty exists only between family members, and even then, it can be betrayed. My own cousin tried to murder me." "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and his sympathy was genuine. "Not everyone is trustworthy, human or alien. But that doesn't mean loyalty is worthless." He gestured toward Kodiak, who was now licking Salith's hand with gentle affection. "Kodiak has been loyal to me through everything," Marcus continued, his voice softening. "When my wife died 3 years ago, he was the only reason I didn't lose myself to grief. He stayed by my side, reminded me to eat and sleep, and gave me a reason to keep going." Salith looked at the dog with new understanding. "He loves you," she said. "He does," Marcus agreed. "And I love him. That's what makes his loyalty so valuable. It's given freely, not because of obligation or fear, but because of genuine affection." The princess fell silent, and Marcus could see that she was thinking deeply about what she had learned. Whatever she had believed about humans before this experience, those beliefs were clearly being challenged. You could have left me to die, Salith said finally. You could have reported finding me to your authorities and claimed some reward. Why did you simply care for me without asking anything in return? Marcus shrugged as if the answer were obvious. Because it was the right thing to do, he said. You needed help, and I could provide it. That's reason enough. Salith's compound eyes studied him with an intensity that made Marcus slightly uncomfortable. You are a strange species, she said. You humans. I was taught that you were primitive and simple, barely worthy of notice. But I am beginning to think my teachers were wrong. Marcus laughed at that. We're definitely not perfect, he admitted. We've got plenty of flaws. But I'd like to think that most of us try to be good, even when it's hard. Kodiak barked once, as if agreeing with his human's words, and Salith found herself smiling despite the pain of her injuries. These two beings, the human and his loyal dog, had shown her more kindness in a few days than her own cousin had shown in a lifetime. Perhaps there was more to this primitive world than she had been led to believe. 2 weeks passed at the research station, and Salith grew stronger with each day that Marcus tended to her wounds. Her exoskeleton was healing, though the scars would remain, and her wing would never carry her through the air again. But it was not her physical recovery that occupied most of Scylla's thoughts during those long days of healing. Instead, she found herself constantly observing Marcus and Kodiak, trying to understand the bond between them that defied everything she had been taught about lesser species. Every morning, Marcus would wake before dawn and prepare food for himself and Kodiak, always serving the dog first with obvious care and affection. He would speak to the animal as if Kodiak could understand every word, discussing his plans for the day and asking for the dog's opinion on matters both trivial and important. What do you think, buddy? Marcus would say while reviewing his research data. Should I focus on the migration patterns today, or finish cataloging those soil samples? Kodiak would wag his tail or bark in response, and Marcus would nod as if he had received valuable advice. You're right, he might say. The migration data can wait. Thanks for keeping me on track. Salith watched these interactions with fascination. You truly believe he understands you? She asked one morning, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. Marcus looked up from his breakfast and smiled. Maybe not the specific words, he admitted, but Kodiak understands tone, emotion, and intention better than most people I've met. Dogs have been living with humans for over 15,000 years, and in that time, they've become incredibly good at reading us. 15,000 years, Salith repeated, amazed by the number. Your species has been bonded with these creatures for that long? Even longer, according to some researchers, Marcus said. Way back in our prehistoric past, wolves, which are the ancestors of dogs, started hanging around human settlements. They would eat our scraps and warn us when predators approached, and in return, we gave them food and shelter. He reached down to scratch Kodiak's ears. Over thousands of generations, the wolves that were friendliest to humans survived and bred, and eventually they became dogs. They evolved alongside us, becoming our partners, our helpers, and our friends. Salith considered this information carefully. So your species took predators that could have killed you and turned them into loyal companions through patience and kindness? Pretty much, Marcus agreed. And it wasn't just dogs. Humans have domesticated dozens of species over the millennia. We formed partnerships with horses, cats, falcons, elephants, and many others. It's kind of our thing. But why? Salith pressed, still struggling to understand. What drove your ancestors to reach out to creatures that might have harmed them? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about her question. I think it's because humans are social creatures, he said finally. We need connection, companionship, and love. We form bonds not because they're logical or beneficial, but because they fulfill something essential in our nature. He gestured toward Kodiak, who had curled up at Salith's feet. "Look at him," Marcus said. "He's a different species from me. He can't speak my language, he doesn't understand most of what I do, and he'll never be able to help me with my research. But he loves me, and I love him, and that love makes both our lives richer." Salith looked down at the dog, who gazed back at her with warm brown eyes. Over the past 2 weeks, Kodiak had spent nearly as much time at her side as at Marcus's, and she had grown accustomed to his presence. "Among the Thesari," Salith said slowly, "we value efficiency and logic above all else. Bonds are formed for political advantage, military alliance, or genetic compatibility. The idea of forming a connection simply because it feels good would be considered foolish and wasteful." "That sounds lonely," Marcus said with genuine sympathy. Salith's antennae drooped as she considered his words. "I never thought of it that way," she admitted. "But now that I have experienced something different, I think perhaps you are right." She reached down and carefully stroked Kodiak's fur, still marveling at how soft and warm it felt beneath her clawed fingers. "This creature saved my life," she said. "He owes me nothing, and I can offer him nothing in return, and yet he treats me as if I am part of his pack." "That's because dogs don't care about debts or obligations," Marcus explained. "They care about the moment, about the connection they feel right now. Kodiak protected you because he sensed you were in danger and he wanted to help. It really is that simple." Salith felt something shift inside her at those words, a fundamental change in her understanding of the universe. "This is your species' true power," she said, with sudden realization. "Not your technology or your military strength, but your ability to inspire loyalty." Marcus looked confused by her statement. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said. "The Thesari Dominion conquers through force and maintains control through fear," Salith explained. "Our subject species obey us because they know the consequences of rebellion. But you humans, you make allies out of potential enemies through kindness and connection." She stood up from her chair and walked to the window, looking out at the forest where she had nearly died. "Your ancestors looked at wolves, dangerous predators that could have killed them, and instead of exterminating them or running from them, they said, 'Let us be friends.' That takes a kind of courage my people have never possessed." Marcus joined her at the window, Kodiak padding along behind him. "I never really thought of it as courage," he said. "It just seems natural to want to connect with other beings." "That is precisely what makes it remarkable," Salith replied. "For you, love and loyalty are instinctive. For my people, they are barely even concepts." She turned to face Marcus directly, and her compound eyes glowed with a new intensity. "I must return to my people," she said. "Vara thinks I am dead, and by now he has probably positioned himself as the new heir. If I do not reveal his treachery, he will inherit the throne when my father dies." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I figured you would need to leave eventually," he said. "My communication equipment can't reach off-planet, but the colonial capital is about 300 kilometers south of here. They have a spaceport with interstellar communication capability." "Will you help me reach this capital?" Salith asked. "Of course," Marcus replied without hesitation. "You're not fully healed yet, and the journey will be dangerous. You'll need someone who knows the wilderness." "You would risk your life for me," Salith said, still not quite able to accept such willingness to help. "You are not my subject, not my ally, not anything to me except a stranger who saved my life. Why would you endanger yourself?" Marcus smiled and placed a hand on Kodiak's head. "You know," he said, "someone asked me a similar question once, years ago. My wife had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I left my career to take care of her. A colleague asked why I would sacrifice so much for someone who was going to die anyway." He was quiet for a moment, lost in memory. I told him that love isn't about calculations or returns on investment. You don't help someone because you expect to benefit from it. You help them because they matter to you, and because you couldn't live with yourself if you didn't. Salith felt her understanding of this human deepening with every word he spoke. "And I matter to you?" she asked. "Even though we have known each other for only a short time?" "You matter to Kodiak," Marcus said simply. "And anyone who matters to him matters to me. Besides, you're a good person, Salith. I can tell. You deserve to get justice for what your cousin did to you." The princess of the Thesari Dominion found herself speechless, overwhelmed by emotions she had never been trained to process. This human, this member of a species she had dismissed as primitive and inferior, had shown her more genuine compassion than anyone in her own royal family. "We will leave tomorrow," Salith said when she finally found her voice. "The longer we wait, the more time Vorath has to consolidate his position." "Agreed," Marcus said. "I'll start packing supplies tonight. It's about a 2-week journey on foot, and we'll need to be prepared for anything." Kodiak barked, as if agreeing with the plan, and Salith found herself smiling at the dog's enthusiasm. "Your companion is eager for adventure," she observed. "Kodiak's always ready for a walk," Marcus laughed. "Even if that walk is 300 kilometers through dangerous wilderness." He grew more serious as he continued. "There is one thing you should know," he said. "I heard rumors, before you arrived, that the Thesari delegation was searching for a crashed shuttle. They claimed it was a training accident and that all passengers were killed, but they didn't seem to be searching very hard." Salith's expression darkened. "Vorath's agents," she said. "They will be watching the routes to the capital, waiting to eliminate any evidence of my survival." "Then we'll have to be careful," Marcus said. "But don't worry, between my knowledge of the wilderness and Kodiak's senses, we should be able to avoid most danger." He placed a hand on Salith's shoulder in a gesture of reassurance. "We'll get you to that spaceport," he promised. "And you'll expose your cousin for the traitor he is." Salith looked at this human and his loyal dog, and she felt something she had not experienced since she was a child. Hope. "Thank you, Marcus Chun." The journey south proved even more dangerous than Marcus had anticipated, and by the 12th day, they found themselves cornered in a narrow mountain pass with nowhere to run. Vorath's agents had been tracking them for days, and Salith had begun to recognize the signs of their pursuit: broken branches that marked their trail, distant sounds of aerial vehicles scanning the forest, and once, the unmistakable flash of the Thesari armor glimpsed through the trees. "They know we're heading for the capital," Salith said as they made camp in a small cave. "Vorath must have realized I survived and sent his best hunters to finish what the crash could not." Marcus checked his supplies with a grim expression. They were running low on food and water, and his energy rifle had only a few charges remaining. "Can't we just activate your emergency beacon?" he asked. "Call for help from your own people?" Salith shook her head. "The beacon transmits on the Thesari military frequencies," she explained. "Vorath has loyal officers throughout the fleet. If I activate it, his allies might intercept the signal before it reaches anyone who would help me." "So we keep moving," Marcus said, though his voice betrayed his exhaustion. He had not slept properly in days, always taking watch while Salith rested, and his body was beginning to fail him. Kodiak whined softly and pressed against Marcus's leg, sensing his human's distress. The dog had been magnificent throughout the journey, alerting them to dangers, finding water sources, and keeping morale high with his unwavering enthusiasm. They set out again at dawn, climbing higher into the mountains where the air grew thin and cold. Salith's reptilian biology struggled with the temperature, and Marcus gave her his jacket even as he shivered in his thin undershirt. "You will freeze," Salith protested. "I'll be fine," Marcus lied through chattering teeth. "You need it more than I do." They reached the mountain pass at midday, a narrow gap between two towering peaks that offered the only route through this section of the range. The colonial capital lay just 2 days' journey beyond, and for a moment, Salith allowed herself to believe they might actually succeed. Then the Thesari agents appeared. They emerged from behind rocks and descended from hidden positions above. 6 warriors in full combat armor, wielding energy weapons that could cut through steel. Their leader stepped forward, and Salith recognized him as Commander Vessel, her cousin's most trusted enforcer. "Princess Salith," Vexel said, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Prince Voros sends his regards. He was quite disappointed to learn that you had survived the crash." Marcus raised his rifle, but Vexel laughed at the gesture. "You cannot harm us with that primitive weapon, human," the commander said. "Our armor is designed to withstand far more powerful attacks. Surrender the princes, and we will let you return to your little research station." "Not going to happen," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his fear. Vexel's eyes narrowed. "Very well," he said. "Then you will die alongside her. A fitting end for a human who meddles in the Thesari affairs." The agents raised their weapons, and Salith felt despair washing over her. They had come so far, survived so much, only to die within sight of safety. Then Kodiak moved. The dog had been standing quietly beside Marcus, seemingly cowed by the armed aliens. But when the weapons were raised, he exploded into action. With a thunderous bark, Kodiak charged directly at the nearest agent, moving faster than anyone expected. The agent fired, but Kodiak was already dodging, his movements guided by instincts honed over millennia of partnership with human hunters. He hit the alien at the knees, toppling him into 2 of his companions, and the pass erupted into chaos. "Kodiak, no," Marcus screamed. But the dog was already attacking another agent, buying precious seconds with his furious assault. Salith saw her opportunity and seized it. She grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him toward a gap in the enemy line, dragging him through while Kodiak kept the agents occupied. An energy blast caught the dog in his side. Kodiak yelped in pain and stumbled, his fur scorched and smoking, but he did not stop. Even wounded, he continued to fight, snapping at any agent who tried to pursue his human. Marcus tried to turn back, his face twisted with anguish. "Kodiak," he cried. "We can't leave him." "He's giving us a chance," Salith said, tears streaming from her compound eyes. "Do not let his sacrifice be meaningless." They ran through the pass, and Salith could hear Kodiak's barks growing fainter behind them. Every sound of combat was a knife in our hearts. This brave creature giving everything for beings who were not even his species. Then the sound stopped. Marcus fell to his knees, a sob tearing from his throat. "Kodiak," he whispered. "My good boy." Salith stood over him, and something crystallized within her. This human had given up everything to help her his safety, his home. And now the companion he loved more than anything in the universe. She would not let that sacrifice be wasted. "I have to end this," Salith said, and she reached into her robes to pull out her emergency beacon. "I do not care if Varith's allies intercept the signal. I am done running." She activated the device and broadcast on every frequency, using the ancient Thesari codes that identified her as royalty. "This is Crown Princess Salith Varn Kai," she declared. "I am alive, and I accuse Prince Varith of attempted murder and treason. I demand that the Imperial fleet respond." The beacon pulsed with brilliant light, sending her message racing toward the stars. Minutes passed in tense silence, and then the sky above them began to fill with ships. The Thesari warships descended through the clouds, dozens of them, and Salith recognized the flagship of Admiral Kethvora, her father's most loyal commander. Smaller vessels landed nearby, and soldiers poured out, not Vareth's agents, but Imperial guards wearing the gold and purple of the royal house. Admiral Kethvora herself approached, her ancient face showing shock at seeing the princess alive. Your Highness, she said, kneeling before Salith. We received your transmission. Prince Vorath has been arrested and is being transported to the homeworld for trial. Salith barely heard the words. Her eyes were scanning the mountain pass, searching for any sign of movement. There is a creature, she said urgently. A dog, you must find him. He saved my life. The Admiral looked confused, but she dispatched search teams immediately. Salith and Marcus waited in agonizing silence, watching the soldiers disappear into the pass. Then a shout went up. A soldier emerged carrying something in his arms, a limp form covered in black and white and brown fur. Marcus cried out and ran toward them, taking Kodiak from the startled alien. He's alive, Marcus said, his voice breaking with relief and joy. He's hurt badly, but he's alive. Salith rushed to their side and saw that Marcus was right. Kodiak's eyes were open, and his tail gave a weak wag when he saw his human's face. Get this creature to the medical bay immediately, Salith commanded, and no one dared question the princess. Hours later, Salith stood in the flagship's observation deck, watching as the fleet prepared to return to the Sari Prime. Kodiak was in the medical bay, being treated by doctors who had never seen a dog before, but who were doing their best to save him. Marcus entered the deck, his face drawn with worry. The doctors say he'll make it, he reported. They don't understand half of what they're treating, but they're figuring it out. Salith felt tears threatening to fall again. He saved us, she said. That magnificent creature threw himself at armed warriors to protect us. I have never seen such courage. That's just who Kodiak is, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. He would do anything for the people he loves. Salith turned to face him fully. When we reach my homeworld, she said, I intend to honor your companion in a way no non-Dasari has ever been honored. I will name him Kethvarai, Guardian of the Crown. Marcus's eyes widened. I don't know what that means, he admitted. It is the highest title a Dasari monarch can bestow, Salith explained. It marks the recipient as a protector of the royal bloodline, worthy of respect from every citizen of the Dominion. There will be those who object to giving such an honor to an animal, but I do not care. She stepped closer to Marcus. And you, she continued, I owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid. You saved my life. You helped me reach safety, and you trusted me when you had every reason to be afraid. I want to ensure that your species is never again dismissed as primitive or inferior. Marcus shook his head. I didn't do any of this for recognition, he said. I did it because it was right. I know, Salith said with a smile. That is precisely why you deserve recognition. Your people have something mine has forgotten. The willingness to love without calculation, to show loyalty without expectation of return. Humanity will be treated as equals in the Dominion, because I have seen firsthand what your species is capable of. The door to the medical bay opened, and a doctor emerged. The creature is awake, she announced. He is asking for his human at least. I think that is what his noises mean. Marcus hurried to the bay, and Salith followed. Kodiak lay on a bed that was far too small for him, bandages covering his wounds, but his tail began wagging the moment he saw Marcus. Hey, buddy, Marcus said, kneeling beside the bed and stroking Kodiak's fur. You did so good. You saved us. You're the best dog who ever lived. Kodiak licked Marcus's face, and Salith watched the reunion with joy in her hearts.